The four horsemen of the Apocalypse, one of the most enigmatic and intriguing passages in the Bible, have fascinated scholars and believers for centuries. This prophetic vision, described in the book of Revelation, reveals four horsemen who symbolize the events that will precede the end of times. Each horseman carries a somber message and a warning about the challenges that humanity will face before the second coming of Christ. The first horseman, riding a white horse, represents conquest and war. He wields a bow, symbolizing the ability to lead humanity into conflicts and confrontations. His presence announces a time of global turmoil and conflict, where nations will clash in a quest for power and dominance. The second horseman, riding a red horse, symbolizes violence and war. He carries a sword, representing the destruction and bloodshed that will ravage the earth. His arrival announces a period of intense violence, where humanity will divide and destroy itself, with wars and revolutions devastating entire regions. The third horseman, riding a black horse, represents scarcity and famine. He carries a set of scales, symbolizing the difficulty of obtaining food and basic resources. His presence announces a time of great deprivation and hardship, where hunger and poverty will afflict entire populations, leading them to despair and desperation. The fourth horseman, riding a pale horse, symbolizes death and disease. He carries a scythe, representing the large-scale harvesting of lives. His arrival announces a time of devastating pandemics and epidemics, where deadly diseases will spread across the world, causing the death of millions. Together, these four horsemen represent the four main plagues that have afflicted humanity throughout history: war, violence, famine, and disease. They are seen as the harbingers of the final judgment, announcing the arrival of a period of great tribulation and suffering before the return of Christ. The appearance of these horsemen is described in detail in the book of Revelation, with each one emerging at specific moments and bringing devastating consequences. Their arrival is seen as a warning sign, a call for humanity to prepare for the challenges that are to come. Over the centuries, scholars and theologians have dedicated countless efforts to interpreting and understanding the symbolic meaning of the four horsemen of the Apocalypse. Some view them as literal representations of future events, while others interpret them more metaphorically, as symbols of the evils that plague humanity. Regardless of the approach, it is undeniable that the presence of these horsemen in the book of Revelation evokes a sense of urgency and the imminence of the end of times. Their arrival is seen as a call for humanity to repent of its sins and prepare spiritually for the challenges that are approaching. The descriptions of the four horsemen of the Apocalypse are rich in details and symbols, sparking the imagination and curiosity of many. Each horseman is endowed with unique characteristics and carries a specific message, intertwined with historical events and biblical prophecies. The white horse of the first horseman, for example, is interpreted by some as a representation of the conquest and expansion of the Roman Empire, while others see it as a symbol of the spread of the gospel. The red horse of the second horseman is associated with conflicts and wars that have devastated civilizations throughout history. The black horse of the third horseman, in turn, is seen as a harbinger of scarcity and famine, events that have afflicted humanity in different eras. The scales he carries symbolize the difficulty of obtaining food and basic resources, leading to misery and deprivation. Finally, the pale horse of the fourth horseman is associated with pandemics and diseases that have claimed millions of lives throughout history. His scythe represents large-scale death, a devastating consequence of the plagues that have plagued humanity. The appearance of these four horsemen of the Apocalypse is seen by many as a divine warning, an admonition about the dangers that threaten humanity. Their arrival symbolizes a time of great turmoil and suffering, where humanity will be confronted with its own sins and failures. This apocalyptic vision has been the subject of intense discussion and debate among scholars and believers. Some interpret the horsemen as specific historical events, while others see them as symbolic representations of recurring problems in the history of humanity. Regardless of the approach adopted, it is undeniable that the presence of the four horsemen of the apocalypse in the book of Revelation evokes a sense of urgency and the imminence of the end of times. Their arrival is seen as a call for humanity to repent of its sins and prepare spiritually for the challenges that are approaching. In this sense, the interpretation of the four horsemen of the apocalypse has been a source of inspiration and reflection for many believers. They represent a constant reminder of the fragility of the human condition and the need to turn to God in times of adversity. Throughout history, different religious groups and movements have dedicated themselves to studying and interpreting the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Some sects and cults, for example, believe that the arrival of these horsemen is imminent and that humanity must prepare for the final judgment. This apocalyptic vision has been a source of inspiration and fear for many believers, leading them to adopt extreme postures and behaviors in search of salvation. Some groups even go so far as to predict specific dates for the arrival of the horsemen, creating an atmosphere of expectation and anxiety among their followers. However, it is important to emphasize that the interpretation of the four horsemen of the apocalypse is a complex and controversial topic, with different approaches and perspectives. Many scholars and theologians have dedicated themselves to analyzing and understanding this biblical passage, seeking to find relevant meanings and applications for contemporary life. In this context, it is essential to maintain a cautious and discerning attitude towards apocalyptic interpretations and prophecies. It is important to avoid falling into extremism and fanaticism, and to seek a balanced and contextualized understanding of the four horsemen of the apocalypse.